Hello, my name is Raphael Hynes and I'm going to talk today about drawing. Now before I start, I just want to say that any type of drawing you do, whether you're drawing from imagination, you're doodling or whatever, is great, and if you get pleasure out of it, that's very, very important. Today I'm going to be talking about a particular type of drawing, trying to draw from life. And I just want to also explain why some of that is difficult. I have here on the slide seeing and the difficulty in drawing what you see. So basically, if you're trying to draw something and you want to get it to look right, you're going to come up with certain problems. I'm going to try to deal with some of those problems now. The first thing, I suppose, is that I want to just talk about why it is that we find it hard to draw what we see. Like the thing we're looking at is right in front of us, and yet we can find it difficult to try and get things right. And to some extent, this is to do with basically the way we evolved our sense of sight. So I want to imagine that you are a little animal running through a forest and you don't have colour vision. So you're wandering in the forest and you see this picture here. This is what you see. So what actually do you see here? You just see trees, foliage, bit of sky, and so on and so forth. Now, let's say you're another fella, and he can see in colour. So he's looking at the same scene, but he can actually see that predator down in the bottom right-hand corner. And so he's a better chance of surviving. And basically, our sight has evolved just to give us an advantage in getting around this three-dimensional world. And when I mean three-dimensional, I mean, things go back, forward, up and down, forward and back. So the problem is, because we're so good at actually moving around the world with this information from our eyes, it's very hard for us to see that information is anything else other than three-dimensional space. Now, we're going to look at this, a complicated slide, and I just want to say with this slide here, don't worry too much about it if you don't get it all, because it's quite complex. Right, so basically our eyes work very much the same as the camera. So some light comes down, let's say bounces off the top of the statue here, and it comes down a straight line through the eye. And you can see that the way that light is moving, the image is going to be projected upside down and indeed back to front at the back in your retina. Now that information then is going to be sent as information, just raw information, to the back of the brain. And then the brain creates a kind of construct from the information of a three-dimensional world. So we can walk around the world, no problem, know how far things are, etc., etc., etc. But the problem is we can't get back to interpreting that information as flat pictures. And that's what we need to be doing. Okay, so one of the things about this is that when we look at a flat picture, we know this picture we're looking at now is flat. It's very hard for us to read it as flat. So if we look at this picture, we're looking at the black and white rectangles, and as they're moving into the picture, they're getting narrower and narrower and narrower. But we read them as two walls curving in on each other. The next image is the same. We look at this picture as if it has a bulge in the center, but in actual fact, it's just that the circles are changing into different shapes around the edge. And no matter how hard we try, we actually can't see these pictures as flat. Okay, now let's just for a minute look at the way we developed as artists, if you like, when we were children. And this is interesting because everybody, no matter where they're from, would draw very much like this. So, I mean, you can see the first image here, the figure, we call him the tadpole man, actually, because he has no body. And he's got a head and legs like Humpty Dumpty. And then later on, we might have a body, but it's very, very small. In actual fact, what the children are doing is they're drawing what's most important big. So the faces are most important, so they draw the faces big. All the hands the same. And when the child learns to count, you've realised, oh, they've got 5 fingers and so on and so forth. So they're not interested in what things look like. It's more to do with, if you like, a map of what's there. Even when they're drawing a landscape, you've got a bar at the bottom for the ground, a bar at the top for the sky, blue, and then all that blank in the middle. You've got a house, and then all the other things are drawn each side of it. There's no overlapping. You don't get something actually on top of something else. Now, I'd say this drawing by about an 8-year-old child is probably where most people stop developing. And here you can see the proportions are better, both in the face and the size of the bodies and so on and so forth. But once again, even though they've attempted to draw people standing in front of the chair, standing in front of the table, and the table in front of the windows, that there's no overlapping. In actual fact, like the people in the foreground are actually under the chair, under the tables, and under the windows, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to show you this picture here. This painting here was painted around 1515 in Italy. I mean, actually, we know that by looking at the picture, that it's probably an Italian painting. But the child in the picture is holding up a drawing, and that drawing is pretty much the same as a drawing a child would draw today. So this is a completely universal thing. The children all develop like this. And our problem is we've got to this stage, let's say when we're at 8, 9, 10, and it's trying to get from that stage, if you like, to where I can draw more realistically. And that's the problem. Now, I'm going to show you this picture here. This picture was painted in the 15th century, that's 1400s, and it's in Spain. And you can look at the table, and you can imagine the table, the width of the table, let's say is the same as the height of the table, or close to it. And that's exactly what the artist has seen, and that's what the artist has painted. So if I put a blue line there to show the width of the table, and the green line to show the height of the table, you see they're pretty close. So this is what you see. Let's say this is what you know about what you see, and but it doesn't look right. And you can see the cartoon on the other side here, and all the objects are falling off the table because, and he's saying it's the way they draw these wretched tables. Now, let's look at this table, and we can see when we measure the width of the table, the little blue line is very, very small in comparison to the green line. But that looks more real. Actually, looking at this picture, we know the table is wide, but we've drawn it the way we see it rather than what we know about it. And this is the big issue. So if we actually go back there, that's what we know about the table, but that's what we actually see. Okay, so sticking to tables again. Imagine if I asked you to draw these two tables here. So you've got one long, narrow table and one slightly wider, shorter table. And so you draw a narrow rectangle and a wide rectangle. Now let's look at that again. That's the first rectangle. And I'm just going to place it there again. And you can see that they're the same, obviously. I'm going to flip that over. So we've got two rectangles that are exactly the same. And now when I add on the legs, they become different again. And no matter how hard we look at this, we can't see those two rectangles as being the same, but they are. They're actually the same rectangles. I'll just pop back to show you. They're the same rectangles. And you could actually measure those up like that, and like that, and you can find that they're actually the same. So our problem then is that we find it very, very hard to know what we're actually seeing, because our brains all the time interpret what we see as three-dimensional. Okay, so I'm going to just look at then what are the issues we need to be thinking about when we're trying to draw an accurate drawing from observation. And again, I'm emphasizing, I'm only talking about accurate drawing. I'm not saying accurate drawing is better than other types of drawing. I'm just making the point that if you want to draw accurately and you want to get things in the right place so that it looks like it, these are the things you have to think about. So I'm going to initially talk about three things, and then I'm going to talk about one more thing later on. So the first thing is the shape. So what is the shape of the thing, and can that shape be broken down into simpler shape? So let's say look at the eye here in Da Vinci's painting, and you say, what is the shape of that eye? And can I break it up? You see he's got a drawing of it down here. Can I break it up into simpler shapes? Okay. And it's very important that you can try to break those shapes up into simpler things. So, the next thing is placement. Where are those shapes to be placed in relation to the other shape. So if I draw this eye here, well, where is the other eye in relation to that? How far away from it is? How high up is it from it? And so on and so forth. And the third one is scale. So how big are these shapes in relation to the other shapes? So if I'm drawing the first eye, well, the second eye has to be more or less the same size. So how do I do that? So these are the three things. And notice I haven't talked about details important, or what is it I'm drawing. That's not important. What's important is the shape, where the shape is, and how big the shape is. They're the three issues you need to think about. Okay, so one way of solving that problem would be to place a grid in front of your subject. And if you don't move, if you have a method of not moving, and you're looking through a grid at your subject, and you have a piece of paper with the same amount of boxes as your grid, you should be able to solve this problem. In this drawing here, a woodcut by Albert Dürer, he has proposed a plan where he's got this wire grid in front of the subject. He's got this funny looking object in front of his eye, and he would rest his eye on that so it wouldn't actually move. So he'd put his eye just directly on it like that and look straight out at the subject so he can't move. And then he would just process of copying what's in each grid. And let's look at that now in more detail. That's what we're going to see. So if we look at drawing a grid, and you could try this yourself. So you would draw a grid on a picture you want to copy. Now, alternatively, you could draw a grid on a sheet of acetate and then place that on top of the image. Now, what I would usually do, if you have a picture that you like and you don't want to damage, I would just photocopy the picture and draw a grid with a biro or a pen or whatever marker on that. Now, how big should the grid be? So you will get more detail with a smaller grid, but if the grid is too small, it can cause confusion. So if you look at the first image we have, there's only 9 boxes covering that vase. So it does help us, but probably not as much as the drawing on the image on the right. There's a lot more images there, and it's much, much easier to deal with information in each one of those boxes. Now, obviously, if you've got too many boxes, it'll get far too confusing. Actually, for this image here, there's too many boxes. You could have somewhere between this and this for that particular subject. So you draw a grid on your paper, and there must be the same number of boxes, and they must be the same shape. And I would recommend the boxes are square. This makes things easier for you. And then you need to consider the following questions while drawing with a grid. So where does the line come into the box? So you're looking at this here, where does it come into the box here? And where does it leave the box? Don't worry about what happens inside the box yet. Just mark off where the line enters the box and where the line exits the box. And then what happens to the line inside that box, and you deal with that. So you can see in this, with a grid, we can solve the problems of the shape because the grid is breaking the shape up. We can see that it deals with the issue of placement because we know how many boxes the next thing is. And also we can see it deals with the issue of scale because we know, how big things are because the boxes are framing everything. And that's one way of actually dealing with it. And it is a pretty good way of doing things. So artists have used this over the years. For example, this painting here by David, French painter. The painting, finished painting is huge. It's over 3 meters high. And he would do a smaller drawing. You can see on the left-hand side, it's a smaller drawing, and there's a grid on it. And he would grid up the canvas, and then he would copy it on. Because you can imagine if you were that close to a big painting and you're trying to draw something, it's very, very hard to get things right because you need to keep standing back to make sure you're not getting things wrong. But with the grid, you have no problem with that at all. And that's how artists would transfer drawings onto a big canvas. And obviously this is very good for working on, if you're doing a mural, whatever, and you have an image, it's very easy to scale up things. All you have to do is make sure is that you've got the same amount of boxes and the box is the same shape, but the size can vary. Okay, now I'm just going to talk very, very briefly now about the issue of tone and colour. Now what I mean by tone is just the light and dark values in something. So I'm not going to go into this too much because this is a whole other different area, but it is slightly some part of it of drawing. And you need to consider tonal values. when you're looking at things. And you have to look at them in relation to each other. So in this image here, you can see the tile A and the tile B. And obviously the tile A is darker than the tile B. Or so you would actually think. And I'm going to just put this on top of it. And I'm going to do this a few times because you might think I cheated that time. But once I put those two bars on, you can see now that A and B look exactly the same. So I'm going to go back again and look at them there. And if you even actually, block out everything else and just look at, we say, tile B, while I do that, you'll find that it doesn't actually change in value, but you can see now the exact same tone. Now the problem there, of course, is that if you're painting that picture or drawing that picture and you draw tile B darker, brighter than tile A, your values are going to be wrong and everything looks a bit flat. It won't look three-dimensional. Okay, but that's that. And the same happens with colour. Now I've got a quote here from a painter, a great French painter, Eugene Delacroix. And he said, "I can paint you the skin of Venus with mud, provided you let me surround it as I will." Now he's not talking about the planet Venus, he's talking about the goddess Venus. And what he's saying is that I could make that little square up here, that brown square up here, look as vibrant as this yellow square down here, just depending on how I surround it. So let's just see, is that true? Okay, I'll go back again. So what we're saying is this brown tile there is the exact same colour as that yellow one there. And there we go. Okay, so you can see this is a serious issue if you're trying to paint something, because what you think the colour is and what the actual colour is are two different things. And I think that's the whole issue with all these issues in drawing, that what we think we know is different to what is actually there. And the artist's job is to try to get back to that. Okay, now, so I'm just looking at that slide again. I've just added one more. What is the colour and tonal value of an area in relation to the values of other areas? So what we're doing is, when we're painting a colour or looking at a tonal value, I have to compare it with the brights and the darks, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to leave that alone in terms of tone and colour, but it is something worth thinking about. So we're going to concentrate more on lines. Before we do that, I'm just going to have a quick look and say, so let's say, for example, we are sitting down, we're trying to draw from life. The results will never be the same. So if two artists sit down and draw the same subject, they're going to do total different things. And I want you to look now at these two paintings here, one by Jan van Eyck, and this painting was painted in 1434, and the other by Velázquez, Spanish painter, painted in 1659. What I'm interested in is at the two dogs. So in this image here, you can see the Van Eyck dog. Van Eyck's issue was, I'm going to paint everything I see. And he's painted every single little hair individually. And you would think, well, that's going to make a realistic looking dog. Velázquez, on the other hand, on the right hand side here, has painted the dog very loosely. You can actually see the brush strokes. And yet he looks more real. So this is a very complex issue, really. I'm not going to go into it too much today, but I just wanted to emphasize that there are different ways of making pictures. And each of them have their own kind of, capture their own bit of reality, if you like. Here again, Abacdura on the left, drawn this beautiful picture of a rabbit. Every detail is in. The Delacroix study of a line, and you can see he was obviously drawing this line from life, so he was moving around the cage. And what's interesting about the Delacroix, okay, it doesn't look as real as the rabbit, but he has expressed the movement and the energy of the line. Now we're going to go back to this picture, these two pictures in a while. The first one here, the one on the left, is by Rembrandt, and he has painted the lady sitting on the chair very loosely. Look at the way he's expressed the cloth. Just a few very squiggly lines. You can imagine those lines were drawn very fast. The image on the right by Ong, every little line is drawn with great precision, and you can imagine a lot of those lines are drawn very slowly and very carefully. Now we're going to be doing two exercises, And one will be more like what Rembrandt's doing, and the other will be more like what Ong is doing. So we'll go back to those images later on. Before we do that, I'm just looking at this absolutely great picture, and Rembrandt now is on the right-hand side here. This beautiful drawing by Rembrandt, probably done in a few minutes. And funny, it's considered one of the most beautiful drawings in art history. And everything's expressed just in a few brush strokes. But what's really interesting about this, when you compare it to the Chinese brush drawing on the left, the marks are almost the same, very similar type of mark making. And I'd often wondered, did Rembrandt see some Chinese art? And here we can see, even when you're like Van Gogh painted the sky at night, this very famous Starry Night is the drawing of it, you can see that he's described everything through different types of lines, squirrels and squiggles and so on and so forth, where Millet, below here, has painted everything in terms of light and dark. So he's more interested in how the light is distributed over the night sky, where Van Gogh is more interested in the whole swirls, the energy of that. Again, just two different ways of looking at the thing. So now we're going to just look at the exercises. And these will help you develop your drawing skills, and it's important that you practice these as often as you can. You really, really need to just practice. And when you're doing exercise, and I'll emphasize this now, and I'll talk about it again, don't worry about the actual result. Just, it's the exercise that's important. So imagine if you're practicing the piano and you're doing scales. These are scales. So you don't play scales at a party. You know, these are just exercises. So get cheap paper and just practice over again on these, and don't worry about the results. Now the first exercise we call gesture drawing. And the instructions are this: make a drawing of a person from life or from an image. Now, preferably from a person, but if you can't, then from an image. Try finish this picture in 1 or 2 minutes, and you should time yourself. So you have 1 or 2 minutes. You could start, if you like, maybe with a 3-minute drawing and bring it down to 1 minute. You concentrate on large shapes and not on the details, and spend most of the time looking at the subject and not your drawing. So if you imagine, if you've got 1 minute to draw, every time you look at your paper, that's less time looking at the actual subject. And try and work relatively big. This is important because if you're trying to draw this, we say on an A4 sheet of paper, it's going to be, I think it's too small. A3 would be ideal, A2 even better. But try and draw big so you're making these nice big sweeps. Now I've got these two drawings here, again by Rembrandt, and I've often said there's two things you know about Rembrandt's drawings. One, they're really good, and secondly, he's done a lot of them. And each one complements the other. The fact that he's done so much drawings means he's good. And you can see in this drawing, this group of people here, the child learning to walk, you see how he just expressed the arm with a few simple lines. He's not really interested in too much detail. And I would imagine he's probably spent more than 2 minutes drawing this. Not too much more, but more than 2 minutes. So your drawing would even be looser than that. So you could practice that, trying to draw. Don't worry and don't get frustrated about not being able to capture something. If you practice over and over again, you will find that your lines will be getting looser, much freer, and it'll also be able to express the subject much better. But you need to practice and don't really worry about the results initially. Okay, now again we're going to quote Delacroix, and he says, if you're not skillful enough to sketch a man jumping out of a window in the time it takes him to fall from the 4th story to the ground, you'll never be able to produce great works. Now that's not true, okay? Vermeer painted about 40 something paintings in his life or something, and there's 35 in existence now, so that's not true. But what he's trying to say is that you need to be able to draw fast to capture the energy of your subject, if there's an energy. This is a picture, a study for Jacob wrestling with an angel. So you've got this man fighting, if you like, the will of God. And in this, he is really trying to express the struggle. And you can see in that drawing, the way the lines are drawn fast captures that energy. Okay. Now, exercise 2, and that's me. This drawing exercise is very important for understanding lines and the shape of lines. The first exercise we did was helping us to express the line in, very quickly, and it helped us to kind of put all the bits together, if you like, how the head works with the arms and so on and so forth. In this drawing, we're actually concerned with individual lines and how to actually see those lines. So the instructions are to make a drawing of your hand, and the hand should be half open like that, right, rather than drawing the hand like that or like that. So have it half open like that. You must position yourself as in the photograph so that you can't see the paper. So you're turned right away from the paper. I would tape the paper to the table. And you're going to spend about 20-30 minutes drawing this exercise. Now, when you start this exercise, you'll probably end up doing your first drawing in about 2 or 3 minutes. So you're going to have to try to slow yourself down and spend more time looking and slow down and slow down and slow down. So we're doing the opposite to Delacroix. You're not allowed to look at your picture at all while you're making the drawing. You have to draw slowly, concentrating on how the lines change direction. Do we have another slide here relating to that? Yeah, so this is the drawing here. And actually this drawing was done in less than 20 minutes. Don't just draw the outline, draw the creases in the hand, etc. And if you feel you haven't drawn a particular feature, or if you forgot you've drawn this feature, do it again. You can lift your pencil, so at times when you come around and you have to lift your pencil to get to the next bit, you can't look at your paper at that stage. You've still got to just almost guess or work out where you think the pencil is, drop it down and keep going. Remember, it's not about what the drawing looks like, it's the exercise itself. And try this exercise with other subjects. Use houseplants, and it's complicated like a houseplant, a crumpled piece of paper, your hand holding, we say, a pencil or whatever. And practice this over and over again. Actually, this is probably an exercise more like doing scales on your piano or whatever than any other exercise. The more you do this exercise, and if you were going to spend, say, 2 hours drawing, I would spend about 20 minutes beforehand just doing this. Just doing this exercise. It's really, really good. And actually, it's a very relaxing exercise. It's really interesting, because what we're actually doing is we're just concentrating on the lines. Okay. Now, the next exercise is an extension of that one. So really don't try this exercise until you've tried this one here quite a lot. So I would say at least a week before you go into this exercise here. So in this exercise, you're drawing, but you can look at the paper, but only when you're not drawing. So I can stop at any time doing my drawing, and I can look at what I've drawn and I can compare it. But when I'm putting the pencil down the paper and I start drawing again, I'm looking at my hand. Now, because of that, you should spend about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to 60 minutes doing this drawing. You can look at the drawing, but only when you are not drawing. And this is the important bit. And the result of that will be this. So you can see it a little more realistically. You can see that you can redraw a line, but don't rub out any of the lines. This is important. You can see, for example, in the finger here, I've drawn the finger a number of times. So each time I drew it, I said, I don't think that's right. I'm going to go with it again. Just want to point out, I'm left-handed, so I have to draw my right hand. Obviously, if you're right-handed, you're going to draw your left hand. So that's just, so you don't have to. If you're righty, you draw your left hand. If you're lefty, you draw your right hand. So don't worry about that. And like I said, the most important thing is that you can go over stuff over and over again. And I think it's very important. People tend to rub out lines that they've spent, an effort putting down. And I think maybe leave that line down there and put another line on top of that. Draw another line, have another go at it, and at least you can see then the two lines and say which one you think is better. And again, we're not interested in drawing, beautiful hands at the moment. What we're interested in doing is learning to actually look at something, because this is the most important thing about this exercise. It forces us to really, really, really look at the lines and so on and so forth. Okay, so this exercise, we're going to be dealing with the issue of measuring. The last two exercises, we're looking at shapes. How do we actually understand and draw shapes? In this here, we're going to be looking at placement, where things are and how big things are in relation to each other. Okay, so we're going to be using either a stick like this here, a kind of a barbecue stick, or you can use your pencil. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a stick by holding it right out like this, all the time outstretched. You don't come in too close because we want to get the exact same distance from your hand to your eye all the time. Okay, so in this case we're going to be drawing a jug, and we want to measure the top of the jug, so the top of the stick will be actually aligned with the top of the jug, and you move your finger down, your thumb down, so it touches the bottom of the jug. So you now have the jug, the length of the jug on your stick, right? You can also do the same, and you can measure the width of the jug again using the stick and thumb. Okay, now you can put these marks directly onto your page. So you could take a measurement and just mark it onto your page, and that will work if you're close enough to your subject. And if your subject is very, very far away, your measurements are going to be very small, and you might have to double those measurements up. Okay. Alternatively, you can decide, I want to make my let's say my jug this wide, and I work out that the height of the jug is, let's say, 2 times the width of the jug. So I measure the width and I find there are two widths in the height, and I could do it that way. But initially, just start with this. It's probably a good idea just to measure and put the information directly down on your page, as you have here in that illustration. Okay, and you just build up and build up like that, so you can see that you're marking off each part, the width of the handle, and so on and so forth. You can just build up the whole thing. These circle things too, you can work with those the widths of the actually ellipse there, and so on and so forth. Okay, you can make these measurements directly onto your drawing. Instead, if the measurements you make are too small, then double them up. You can alternatively, you can just mark a comparison between the two measurements, as I've said. Okay. The next thing we're going back to, right? The next thing is we're looking at how we can use our stick or pencil to create just horizontal lines or vertical lines. So I can hold my stick up so that it's horizontal, and I can see what's happening along that horizontal line. So in the image here, I have the stick, and the horizontal line is touching the bottom of the jug, of the white jug, and you can see the brown jug. I can see how far the brown jug goes underneath that line. So that's very important. That's a nice little trick you can do. So it's literally just creating a grid. You can hold this stick anywhere you like, as long as you keep it horizontal. And you can see, well, how far things are below that line and how far above, and so on and so forth. The last slide then, of course, the last one is we're looking at using the stick, the vertical. So I can hold my stick up vertically. And in this drawing here, I can see, this picture here, I can see that the stick runs in line, the two spouts run in line on the same vertical line. So if I could draw a line down my page, I know this spout here and this spout here will be on that line there. So it's another way of actually looking at those things. So these are just some of the issues dealing with drawing. And like I said, the most important thing to do is practice and really enjoy the work. I know I've given a lot of information today. If you can get some of these exercises and just practice them, and the most important thing is not to worry about them looking like art, looking like finished pictures. These are exercises, so it's about the learning process that's important. Okay, thank you very much.